Hi, this is Levi. Before we get into this episode, I wanted to take a quick minute to introduce a few of the other podcasts in the WCF Podcast Network. Tom and Naomi are exploring how we interact in our ecclesial relationships in From the Platform. It's a very in-depth series that is incredibly helpful for understanding and developing compassion and better listening practices. That's From the Platform. Sam Taylor from Cleveland, Ohio, produces weekly devotionals in Pause to Consider. Think Mr. Rogers meets Fireside Chat. I love Sam's humble style and think every episode is fantastic. You can find both of those wherever you get your podcasts or on our website at wcfoundation.org. Now, here's the show.
Welcome back to A Little Faith. This is a podcast sponsored by the Williamsburg Christadelphian Foundation. A Little Faith podcast explores both the challenges and hope of living a life of faith. I'm Steve, and I'm here with Alison Routledge, Suzette Thompson, and Viv Brown. We're sitting in Alison's living room, and it's wonderful to be here with you all. Today, we're going to be exploring together what a Proverbs 31 woman can teach us today and how we manifest those learnings and experiences in our own communities. Let's start with Women of Valor, the Proverbs 31 woman. I'd like to read this quote from Rachel Held Evans. The Proverbs 31 woman is a star not because of what she does, but how she does it, with valor. So, do your thing. If it's refurbishing old furniture, do it with valor. If it's keeping up with your 2-year-old, do it with valor. If it's fighting against human trafficking, leading a company, or getting other people to do your work for you, do it with valor. Take risks, work hard, make mistakes, get up the next morning, and surround yourself with people who will cheer you on. So, why did reading Rachel Held Evans inspire you?
I think one of the things that particularly chimed with me was her interpretation of Proverbs 31, which I think historically I'd always kind of taken it as a prescription, a description of a perfect woman. And the way she kind of described it with the Jewish background and things really was very enlightening, really.
Yes.
Which is why we started a Facebook group called Women of Valor for Christadelphian women, and that it was from
Proverbs
directly from that, before she died, obviously. So that's obviously made it much more poignant, really, that actually all women are women of valor in their lives. It's not somebody who's the businesswoman or has the perfect children that attend meetings and enjoy attending meetings. It's everything you do.
Yeah, so Proverbs 31 is a description of all sorts of different things that different women are doing at different times, not one woman doing them all the time, because how would you ever sleep?
I never was any good at sewing.
Not me.
Yeah, but that woman, though, is, not extraordinary, but is doing a lot of things that are, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but buying land.
Yeah,
yes.
Male domain.
That's very interesting, actually, that's in that's a curiosity. It's in the Bible, I guess.
I think once, so Viv introduced me to Rachel Held Evans when they came up here, and once you start reading her blog posts and exploring more about it, you can't help but notice when you read the scriptures everywhere where women are women of valor, where women are breaking out of this sort of mold that we think they are in and doing their thing, really. And I think that's probably what's encouraged us to try and, in different ways, try and push the envelope a little bit further. Well, it's been mentioned at Sisters' Day, last year, if not the year before. Many of the sisters who've spoken have made reference to her work.
I think it's being shared a lot more widely.
And there's also Sarah Bessie is another one that is very well known.
So you were talking about Women of Valor, sort of
No, it's just a
Facebook group.
Because, I mean, both Alison and I, and probably to a lesser extent Suzette, have these conversations on Facebook with people, and there's lots of these different Christadelphian groups, and every so often people who run them tend to have different topics they don't want to talk about, so somebody else starts another group where you can talk about that topic. And a lot of them are quite male heavy.
Yes, definitely.
There's quite a lot of very intelligent, bright young men out there, all with different things they want to talk about. And actually, through that medium of Facebook, I've got to know some of them who have actually come and joined our meeting since. So, it is a good place to build relationships. But somehow the issue of women supporting one another doesn't seem to fit into necessarily those groups, because there's such a lot of male stuff happening and doctrinal arguments, which, obviously are interesting if that's the particular doctrine you have a problem with. So it was Alison's idea. I remember sitting in our back garden across the road here one summer saying that you thought it would be a nice idea to start a women-only group, just so that we could have a slightly different perspective and talk about the way our lives, and share things about the way our lives work in the meeting.
I mean, I can remember precisely when the thought came into my head to start this group, and it was directly after a particularly interesting and inspiring talk by a woman about Jesus in the lives of women. And after that talk, we were in conversation. I was in conversation with somebody who said she had nowhere to talk about these kind of things because they're taboo in some churches, and some of the ideas were new to her. Some of the ways of interpreting the Bible were new to her, and she just said, and that's what made me think, well, we could start something, a private Facebook group that people join because they're interested in this topic and they know it can be sensitive. So people are asked that they don't sort of repeat what people have said unless they ask their permission, and people can post interesting articles, books that they've read, talks that they've heard, experiences that they've had, be they good or bad, and it's kind of grown from there. So there's about coming up to 250 members now, and I think they're from quite a wide variety of different Christadelphian churches. As far as I can tell, a wide variety of ages.
How needed, I mean, this is needed now, but hasn't this been needed for a long time? This sort of thing, this sort of discussion.
It really depends what church meeting community you are in. If you're in a community where the elders, the ABs encourage broad conversations, broad-minded views, open discussion, which I very much felt coming from London 4.5 years ago, that was encouraged. I wouldn't say we are as far ahead as perhaps the meeting that Viv and Alison go to, but in Ealing we were certainly exploring it and fairly moving ahead reasonably quickly with women taking more active participation. So there are people where, young women and women, older women, where they've never ever had the opportunity to even think about the possibility that they might be able to do something else in their church or to serve God in a different way other than a traditional way.
Yeah.
And what tends to happen is that sisters of a previous generation who were very competent, or are very competent, and their influence happens behind closed doors, so they'll be influencing their husbands, they'll be writing their husbands' talks, they'll be telling them what they should do on the arranging committee, and they'll be pulling the strings behind the scenes, which is not really satisfactory, is it? It's pretending they're not doing it.
Well, I think the point, if I can just make one point, I think the point is that it is satisfactory for that generation, because that generation are generally conformist. We talked about, didn't we, that sense of duty, sense of responsibility, conforming. They're not going to rock the boat. Our generation is still a little bit like that, but the generation behind us, the millennials and the Generation Zs or whatever, are not like that. They are brought up and educated to discuss and question everything. And so that is why we have to discuss these things, because that generation are not going to just sit
They're-
and accept.
They're still very simple
These
things
things.
like reading the Bible out loud, sharing the bread and wine, greeting people at the door. I mean,
Oh,
my
I know that.
mum, is 85, and she's always enjoyed reading the Bible out loud, and she's always enjoyed it when she's been in a sort of informal situation where she could read 5 verses. And I think she has been frustrated. She would. I don't think
Yeah.
she would want to.
I'm saying generally. I know, and the same with my mum as well has got frustrated with that. But generally, the older generation will accept it and just conform. And we are that sort of middle ground where a lot of our peer group as well will just accept it.
Yes.
But
I know my own children
haven't.
haven't.
What's happened, I think, is that some of the older generation have said to us, just be patient, slowly. And the people who couldn't do that have actually left, and so there's no point us saying to the generations under us, just be patient, because we know that doesn't work. We've been patient our whole lives, and it's quite often damaged our children.
And I think also it can then almost put too much emphasis on hospitality and cooking and looking after children and Sunday school teaching, those things that are allowed. They don't suit every woman.
No?
And actually you can feel quite inferior if you're not the person that can organise a church meal or, I think actually, or host a lot of people in your house or,
For me, it is coming. I have 2 granddaughters who are, what are they? I should know their ages, but 10-ish, 11, maybe they're 11. She said they're 11. And when Ellie was 5, she asked her mother, how come it's just the men who do on a Sunday? How come it's just the men who do it? Okay, so observant. But I want a church in which they feel like their brains are worth something, are valued.
I think it's very much about using the talent that you have to serve God. And that might well be in cooking and hospitality and Sunday school and all of that. And that's fantastic. But if you really feel, and we can think of people on Women of Valor who, if you really think you've got a talent, or you know that your talent is speaking or reading or praying or whatever, and you never get to use it. You never get to use it, despite the fact, or you study, except once a year at Sisters' Day. How frustrating is that? And how frustrating for our young people to never see.
We have, a few years ago at Sisters' Day, a lovely sister well into her 90s.
Yes, I was going to mention that. That's
and
amazing.
she gave a testimony there, which was heartbreaking in a way, because she had spent, and she didn't come across as bitter, but you sensed it underneath there, the missed opportunities that she'd had. And of course, Sheila Harris, you'll probably have to edit that name out, brilliantly clever woman, never married, but was always very hospitable.
She did it all.
Lots, and she was a classics teacher. She knew Latin and Greek. Lots of worthy brethren would go and learn from her, but it all had to. She was never allowed to stand up and talk to more than one of them at a time. It's such a shame.
But presumably she went to university in quite the early days.
Yes.
Women going to university,
yes, true.
actually.
Yeah.
And didn't she have a particular interest in the kind of local Greek?
Yes, the Koine Greek, the New Testament Greek.
Which was very relevant.
Which was probably slightly different from classical Greek.
Yes.
But she's always been an inspiration, I think, hasn't she?
Yeah.
There's somewhere on the list there we meant to talk about women that inspired us or mentored us, and so there are lots of different directions. There have always been the women who seem to be able to rustle up a lasagna for 10 at the drop of a hat, which is daunting but very nice. But there have always been these other women as well.
We can turn about that, but I want to talk about that next. Women who have inspired you. But before we do that, in case someone is listening to this, and a woman, I presume, you want women of valor. Hopefully you don't have posers who are there. Where do they look? What's a Facebook page called Women
It's
of Valor?
just called Women of Valor.
And there are other groups called Women of
There
Valor,
are
so
other
you have to get the
groups,
right one.
I mean, a lot of people have joined because one of their friends has recommended. And we do say from the outset, this is a place where we can feel,
Safe.
safe to discuss these things. So, and that seems to have been what's happened. And some very interesting books get posted and articles, all sorts of things, really. And some people have expressed their own fears and worries and doubts, which has been good too.
Isn't it about 10% of Christadelphian churches in the UK are sort of more actively using women in, well, there's obviously a big continuum, but more actively using sisters in their services in some way.
People to come there if they were just trying to collect evidence of where all the heretics are.
Yeah, so there are lists of ecclesias where women are able to do more things. But
Right. Yeah.
So do you each have you mentioned it, a woman of valor in your past that was someone who made a significant impact on you?
Well, we were talking about this earlier in the week, weren't we? I can remember when we were first married with a small child and at a meeting where my husband and I were the young couple, long way from home and family, and there were several people there who were just places I could go to for a coffee with older children, and nothing spectacular, just friendly. That there were probably 3 or 4 couples, and it probably would be the women that I would see because I'd be walking around with the pram. So that was nice. That was just an experience of some support there.
I think in my life there have been older women who gave me real practical support, and I think that's the important thing, really. More the practical support, the shopping when you had a young child, or staying with our older children when I was in hospital, having a baby, that kind of thing. Sometimes I think you have to be so careful that it doesn't become the older woman knows best somehow. That worries me. That worries me about the idea of mentorship, actually, because I think of the workplace and mentorship, and that's usually somebody more senior, somebody more knowledgeable, somebody more experienced who kind of guides you and supports you. And I don't know that you can necessarily move that across to a church setting in the same way. I think support, sharing experiences, but it's so easy for it to come across as knowing how to do things, or you can dismiss something because you've got through that phase and you've almost forgotten it, and also you're living in different times. Just a half generation makes a massive difference to and where you live and who's around you. And I think for me, my greatest support is sitting on my right, really. Somebody who's been my age and been living in the same circumstances, raising children at the same time. I think we probably share more things than with somebody older, to be honest. I would say.
On a different vein, I would say in terms of encouraging me to use skills that I have, that would have come years ago, having been at a meeting in London where there were brothers who were in the leadership role who actively encouraged me to be on a preaching committee, run the preaching committee, actively encouraged me when Bible classes split into homes. I include my husband in this, actually encouraged me to prepare a Bible class discussion in homes. It was done in a way where it was in homes and that was okay, but that gave me lots of experience of doing Bible study and discussing, throwing out questions and discussing, and then another sister I can remember who's quite a bit younger than me came over from Australia rather, because we had a lot of Australians that come to London, and her background was a very, very traditional Australian background, and she found the openness and the ability to discuss all sorts of things that were totally taboo. She found it so liberating. She was a very, very clever lady, and she would read a lot and she would share a lot with me. So I think women of valour, but also men of valour, you know, to have men that are behind you, whether it's your family members or certain individuals in your church that are behind sisters studying and discussing and doing things, is fantastic. It's as important,
that's
absolutely
true.
as important
Yes, I think that
as
is
having
important.
women behind
I think
you.
that's come across in the Women of Valour group that women do want men to support them and help, because they've had a lot of experience in preparing talks or giving prayers, and it's good to share those experiences they've gone through and how they've gone about it. And I think sometimes perhaps men are a little bit fearful of this change, and perhaps don't overtly show as much support as they might. Do you think?
Why would they be fearful, do you think?
I guess for a man, a lot of status comes, and feeling of self-worth comes from being on the platform, as it does in work. You know, you've got your work and you've got your meeting role.
I wouldn't, yeah. Some men.
Some men, no.
A lot of men don't want to do it, do they?
Yeah, a lot of men, they don't want to do it.
Well, that does
and
come
actually
across as well.
feel pushed into doing something.
I
they
think
really
a
don't want to
lot
do.
of young men don't want to do it,
Yeah.
and that can stop them from making the move into
That's
being committed.
absolutely true. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think we have tried to think about having some sessions, haven't we, at our church, where we kind of discuss, men and women together, how you might go about.
We have done one or two,
Yes,
actually.
when we could perhaps do some more of those, actually, really, and it's perfectly acceptable to have things written out or on your phone.
But again, it's about doing what you feel you are able to do to serve your church community and serve God. And if a sister does not want to do any talking or whatever, they don't have to. And I think that's where I go to a much more traditional church, and most of the sisters, they would say, I don't want to be on the platform because we have a big platform. I don't want to be anywhere near it.
But if you invite them to talk about their job,
yes,
or how they go about,
or an environment that is
organising
less
a meal for the church,
formal,
or something that's just not a sort of Bible talk as such, something a little bit broader about their experiences with their family, they probably would, or about
but also
they're involved in, or somewhere they've visited. That you could, once you kind of broaden things out
and make the environment less formal.
Yes.
So where I belong, the services are all very formal in a very formal hall, whereas we have a lovely hall at the back that you could have chairs around tables and chat. And on the odd occasion we've done that, the sisters, particularly the older sisters, have got great things to say. They've got great Bible knowledge, but like you say, we never hear it. Never hear it. Yeah, short talks, short.
You know.
But as we said a while ago, previous generations, very few women went to university or went into particularly high-powered jobs. They might well have done jobs which they were expected to give up either when they got married or they had children, and they've made life for themselves in that, and they've probably become very skilled at some of these other things. So again, there's the threat that somehow, if all the young women are doing different stuff, does that devalue your years of service? And I think there is a fear there that if things change, that means somehow the way you did it was wrong. I mean, I still feel slightly, I don't know quite what the right word is, threatened, guilty. I see younger women now who are going back to work when their children are quite small, which was a choice I didn't make. I was able to stay at home with most of them for quite a lot of the time. But they will probably then, when they're my age, have, I want to say high power, that's the wrong word, careers that are perhaps more satisfying. Whereas if you make a different choice, you end up in a different place. You can't do everything. So that's one of those things it's difficult to get over, isn't it? Does somebody else's different choice mean that your choice is somehow wrong? Which obviously it
works
doesn't.
both ways, actually, because yes. And do other people who chose to go out to work full time from the moment they've given birth, and maybe they didn't have a choice, they then feel bad that they didn't stay at home. Women are very good at throwing guilt on each other.
Oh yes,
between generations. It's the classic mother-in-law,
Yes.
isn't it? You can't possibly be doing that right. And how dare you leave your baby? With the husband, how can he possibly know how to look after it? So there's always that intergenerational conflict.
And that's why there needs to be openness and honesty and sharing of these doubts and disappointments, and rather than there sometimes can seem like it's sort of an unwritten pressure. Obviously not unwritten is the wrong word, but to look like everything's fine, everything's going well, the children are all doing what you want them to do, and sometimes we're guilty of not being very honest, I think, sometimes. And,
I think we also have to remember that our community has an increasing number of single sisters, for whatever reason, and particularly in London, great careers, they're single, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter why. They must find it very frustrating that they are still told the traditional, well, you learn at home.
Ask your husband.
You learn from the man at home, whether it's the father or the husband. And it is absolutely, I find it, if it was me, I would be really, really devastated and insulted to be told that. And I can think of a number of single sisters, fabulously capable, really, really capable, who do a lot behind the scenes, but actually would be brilliant on the platform, whatever the platform is. They would be brilliant leading services.
What would you tell your younger self? That was good. Now that you've gotten to this point, what word of advice would you give to your younger self that would change things for you personally?
Probably relax a bit more.
Yes, I was going to say that. I would say probably something like, be more mellow about things and
Well, I think in a church context, I would say, do not be intimidated by age or gender. Respect it, obviously, but do not be intimidated by it. Don't be scared to speak up. Again, obviously in a respectful way, but don't be scared to speak up and to say what you think, because I think I spent a lot of my younger years being like that and having all these questions and not having a place where I could say them. Obviously, I think, the meeting that I was at in London was a place where I could say that. And increasingly now where I am, I say it as well. And don't care so much about what people think of you.
Yes,
so I think there is it's a really good and bad part of our community, I think, is that we worry so much about what other people are going to think of us. And I don't think we should. I think we should worry about what God thinks of us and what Jesus thinks of us, not about what other people think of us. And that would be mine. Don't be intimidated, and don't worry about what other people think of you.
In some ways, especially about what people within the church group think of us.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Because actually, how you seem to people, to the other people in your community, is probably more important than the people that you live amongst. And
yes.
And
yes, don't worry about what your church community think of you so much. I mean, it's important how you present yourself outside is important. You don't want to be presenting two different people, obviously, but how our church community perceives us is less important, really.
Yes, because the church has that kind of power over you if you let it. If you feel that there are invisible, unspoken boundaries which you can't cross, because if you do, you'll be threatened with no longer being part of the group. In a sense, you have to be, and that's hard. Because
and it's this causing offence.
Causing offence can be used as a threat.
You don't want to cause offence, You really don't. But there does come a point when you see the younger generation, your own family members, walking away, and you think, well, how long do I not cause offence before I actually speak up and say something? Because we're not bringing the young people along with us, and that's possibly because we're all very nice middle-class English people who don't want to cause offence.
Also, don't put too much pressure on yourself, and learn to say no, which I know somebody in this room finds very difficult, but that you can't be everything and do everything.
Yes,
Really, and neither can anyone else. However, it seems, because I think you often look at other people through rather rose-tinted spectacles.
Yes, you see apparently perfect lives, and
and it's well, we've realised, I think we've experienced that's often not the case, and there's other things going on that
yes, I can remember, at our one couple that seemed to have the perfect life, who then split up quite dramatically, and there was mental illness involved and everything, and that was a bit of a wake up call, not to judge other couples, other people in the meeting by the apparent glossiness of their home or of their children or whatever. So another thing you might say to the younger self is just to value your friends, really.
yes,
And there may be a friend anywhere you go. You never quite know when you might meet that person that becomes a lifelong friend, or maybe a friend for a particular season.
and allow yourself that downtime to sit and chat and have coffee, because there's always going to be a list of things to do. And I'm sure we whiled away
Glass of wine.
many a time, and we've probably a whole list of things that, should be done, but actually allow yourself that downtime.
Yes, and not. I mean, we've talked as well about the feeling that you have to go to every meeting event that's on, and to let up on that a little bit for your own sake as well as for the children, because that can be a real pressure to get these perfect children sitting there neatly in rows at every ecclesial function.
We've never managed that.
No.
I'm certainly not dressed appropriately.
Whereas that can be damaging to them, and the stress involved in making that happen is damaging to you as well. That's not always the best thing to do. Sometimes it would be better to take them for a walk.
Another thing I would say in terms of women of valour and whatever is that to take the opportunities when they present them to you. So if much as I don't want to, and I'm not sure any of us do, if you're asked to give a prayer at Sisters' Day, or if you're asked to do a talk, or if you're asked to
be secretary
or something, well, the point is though, if we don't show that women can do these things, and women can pray publicly, or do a talk, or lead a discussion, or lead a community like the ALS or whatever, then how are we ever going to encourage the next people to do it? And I think that's really important, and I think Viv and Alison absolutely have done that. The things they've organised, the fact that Viv is runs King's Heath fabulously.
Brother Viv.
But much as you don't necessarily want to do it, it's not out of any feminist angst at all. It's the fact is the opportunity's there. You need to take it. Otherwise, nothing will ever change.
Organise things outside the kind of
standard stuff.
Structure, which I think is what we did.
Yeah.
You've done lots of things. With your girls particularly.
But we realised it was going to be difficult to organise this kind of event within the structure as it was then of the church. So you can actually find another way of doing things sometimes.
That was one of the things that Hoddesdon a few years ago, where that Auntie Whitehorn suggested to people to just sort of go and do the thing. Don't wait until you've got approval. Have your ideas and do them in a small scale in your own home or wherever. There's nothing to stop you organising anything you want to, really.